Thank you, Demet, and thank you, Charlene. And thank you. Let me start, and I will also give the word to you, Eléonore, soon, but I would like to start to say thank you for the invitation to this event. I think it's a really nice place to be in together with you, and I'm happy to share some of my experiences. And Eléonore and I have planned this presentation and that we will go a little bit like shift between both of us. So I will now actually start by giving the word to, or continue by giving the word to Eléonore.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. So it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. And I thank Charlene and Demet for their work in putting together the event. And it's been very nice to also meet actually Mia through this event. So we're going to start. So as Mia said, we are going to be like going back and forth, and I hope it's going to be okay for everybody to follow as we switch from one to the other, but we didn't want to repeat each other. So I'm going to start, and actually I'm going to try to have the PowerPoint work. Yes, why publish a book? And I think, Mia, it's your turn to explain to us why publish a book.
Yeah, so we decided to start with this question. It's an obvious question perhaps to some of you, but to others might not be. And we wanted to open it up a little bit to discuss what can be the reasons for publishing a book. And this idea of opening up with the question came from actually our when we prepared for this presentation, we realized that there are quite different contextual situations for PhD students and early career researchers. So if in some contexts, PhD students are encouraged to publish their thesis as a book afterwards, in other contexts, they might not be, because, for example, if I mention from my own experience, writing a PhD in a Swedish context, it is already published as a book from start. So, so this is something that is not very usual to do in the Swedish academia, to publish then the PhD as a book after the PhD. But for others, it might be that you are really expected to do so. For example, in the case of me, I decided in my PhD to write a collection of articles, which also meant that the articles were already published and I couldn't transform them into a book afterwards. And the articles were published as part of a book in the university when I defended my thesis. So this becomes a different story for me. So in the end, what I did was that I decided to publish my first book based on my postdoc research. It can also be the case that the discipline matters. So if you come from different scholarly areas, this is also different in terms of traditions and habits. So what you are expected to do. In some disciplines, for instance, closer to natural sciences, I encountered more often, that these scholars usually only publish articles, or even some of them conference papers. Whereas in other disciplines, often closer to the humanities, it is more expected to publish a book. And taken together, all those different reasons, what is best for you and your own decision depends then on your plans and ideas for your future career. So in all cases, I would like to share the experience that both writing an article or articles and books are slow processes. So in both cases, this is good to put in some thoughts into how you would like to go about it. Eléonore, I give the word to you to add if you have anything more you would like to add.
No, I think, I mean, I agree because we did the PowerPoint together. So, but I'd like to stress the idea that it's slow. It's, as you said, it's also costly. So costly in time, in energy, etc. And it's like when you want to publish in a very good journal, or you want to publish a book. It's like you have that kind of ambition at some point, and so you have you have to, how can I say that, to make sure that the best argument, for example, from your dissertation or from your postdoc, like really like what you think is the most original contribution you're making to your field, you're going to keep that for your book or for an article that you're going to put in the best review, the best journal that you can aim at. So I think because it's so slow and because it's so costly, you really have to think in advance. If you want to do a book, then keep some of your data, keep some of your argument, thinking, okay, I don't want to use it now for like a small piece or a chapter somebody asked me, because I think that, maybe this is what the book is going to be about. So be really careful and thoughtful about your choices, because we don't have that many great ideas and we don't have that much time to do research all the time and to like come up with new data and new ideas and new arguments. And so because it's so slow, I be careful thinking forward in your thinking about what this is going to be, and if it's going to be in the book, that's where it's going to be, and you should not put it somewhere else. So I think that's also the publishing a book goes into a broader economy of what you're going to publish total, and you have to try to reserve like what you think is the most original idea for that. I mean, that's my opinion in my context, because I'm in a context, I'm in sociology. If we're talking about like English speaking academia, I think it still matters to do a book, and it still has a little bit more traction or impact. So that's why, which may not be true for other disciplines, other contexts again. So that would be what I want to add. So so if you have the idea that you want to publish a book, whether from your PhD, from your postdoc, from another research, but it's your first timer, one important first step is going to be to identify the press where you can publish, and maybe the type of series where you want to publish. So being in gender studies, we do have gender studies series in many presses. I mean, not many, but like quite a few university presses have a series in gender, sexuality, and or queer studies. So we don't like mention here all of them. Some are very famous and prestigious. Like you can try to go for the Duke Next Wave New Direction in Women's Studies, and you'll be in good company with Sarah Ahmed, for example, as you publish in this series. Good luck. Then you can try, so Minnesota University Press also has a series and used to publish a lot of feminist theory and queer theory work. Routledge has several series dedicated to gender studies, and one of the series is where Mia published her book, for example. Palgrave also, for example, has a series on intersectionality, which is edited by Nira Yuval Davis and Mary Ange Hancock, for example, so two main prominent figures in the field. Oxford has series in gender and politics mostly, so more like poli-sci stuff. ECPR, which is political science also in Europe, has a specific series for gender and politics. So, I mean, lots of presses have series, but they vary in terms of, some may be really into gender theory, very interdisciplinary or very like oriented toward humanities. Others might be more into political science or sociology. So you have to familiarize yourself with this editorial, like this kind of publishing landscape, and try to figure out where your book could fit, depending on the disciplinary approach and depending on your argument. So it's always good to browse all those series, look at the topic they're into, who have they been publishing, do they have recent publications? Sometimes you realize that some series haven't published any book in like 6 or 7 years. So it probably means that it's kind of actually not working anymore. So it's probably not a super idea to send your work there. You can also look if the series, some series are really like led by prominent scholars in the field, such as the Duke series or Palgrave on intersectionality. Others are more series that the publisher kind of carve out on topics without like a very strong editorship. So in one case, you're going to send your manuscript to the press. In another case, you can send it directly to the scholars who are in charge of the series. And so, but in any case, if some scholars are identified as being the editor of the series, of course, you have to ask yourself if your work is relevant to what they do and to their own work. Like, is it going to be of interest to them, to the series, depending on what they've already published? So you have like quite a bit of time to spend looking at those web pages. I didn't count the hours, but I spent a lot of time looking at University Press's web page. So that's one of the possibilities. Of course, now most presses also have more disciplinary series, right? So sociology, political science, whatever, history, whatever your field is, this is always also an option. But then you also have to look at what they've been publishing. Like, are they actually familiar or interested in publishing gender-oriented or sexuality-oriented work in more mainstream kind of series? But like, for example, I published in Oxford Sociology, but then I did see that they had published work in gender studies and in feminist theory before. So they were not like, they did not have a narrow conception of sociology at all. They had like a very broad, very interdisciplinary conception of sociology, which is why in the end it was a good fit. So it really depends on the publisher and on the series. Mia, do you want to add something on this?
No, I think you can go ahead and I can add after next.
Okay, good, thanks. Yeah. So hierarchy among publishers. So there is an informal or implicit hierarchy among among publishers. But what does it mean really? So actually there's lots of different hierarchies. And it kind of, the big, I guess the message here, it depends. It may not matter in the end, so you can be aware of it, but maybe it's not relevant for your own project. So, so in the academic field, some US university presses are considered to be leaders. So for example, in my field, in social sciences, Harvard, Princeton, Chicago are going to be considered as the leading press in my domain. It's going to be the same in history, for example. But then you have lots of other American university presses. You have, so I mentioned Duke, there's Stanford, there's Berkeley, there's like Minnesota Press, NYU, Columbia also has a press. So many universities have presses. And, Toronto, University of Toronto in Canada also has a university press, Vancouver as well. So you have like this kind of different tiers of university presses, but they're all university press, meaning like a peer review process and an academic stamp on your work. But then, of course, like their ability to market your work, their interest in your work is going to vary, and also the diffusion. Like some university presses don't have a lot of money and they don't market towards a global audience. They cannot really like reach very much outside the US or outside Canada, or, the books are going to be hard to find, etc., etc. So there's a lot of variety within that category of US American university press. Then you have another type of publishers, which are mostly Oxford, Cambridge, which is like based both in the US and UK, but mostly UK press, considered as like the leading press in that part, in like non-US leading university presses, and they are global publishers. So like they market in the US, they market everywhere, they make the book in India, whatever. It's like the big mammoth in publishing. Then you have European-based university academic presses, like, some European universities have their own press. Sometimes it's in the own language of the country. So in France, you have university presses that publish in French. You have the same in the Netherlands. You have the same in Italy, in Spain. So, with a local language. And then you have also press that European university press, which publish in English. So, for example, Amsterdam does it. Bristol, obviously, ECPR is also a university press. I mean, it's not per se a university press, but it's an academic press which publishes in English. So that's like another category. And then you have what's often called the commercial publishers, but which are very much academic publisher and which are also global mammoths, like the big Oxford and Cambridge, and which are also based in the UK, which are mostly Routledge and Palgrave. But you know, you have Brill, you have like others. There's lots of, I mean, Springer. What else? So Macmillan now is with Palgrave, but like, well, there's like lots, you know, some presses like that, which are not university based, but which are among the biggest academic publisher with a big diffusion in many contexts, and especially in Europe. So what you aim at depends on actually your book and your project and your constraint. You know, how much time pressure do you have? Do you want to get published quick? Do you think it's going to be easier to be accepted at Palgrave than at Harvard? It may be so. It depends on your audience. Like, are you talking mostly to a European audience or to a US-based audience? It depends on the topic. It depends on your discipline, etc. So, for example, if you are on a tenure track in a very tough institution, you might want to publish in an academic university press, because for them, it's going to make a difference. So if you're in tenure track in a US institution, you kind of have to find a university press, because a commercial press is not going to be good enough. But in Europe, we don't have that much, I think, but again, it's like my personal opinion. I don't think in Europe it matters that much. A book is still a book. And so we don't have, maybe we don't finesse like that, maybe in some institution, but like in most of the academia, I think we see those presses are more, we don't put that many hierarchies, because also a lot of like what are considered the top academic presses anyway are in the US. So, and in many ways, not often interested in publishing work that come from Europe. So that kind of explain why we see things differently here as well. So I mean, there's pros and cons for each press. You know, some university press in Europe are a little bit smaller. They don't have the same like marketing power in terms of disseminating your book, but then you might get your book out quicker, or you might have a contact there, or you might the series might be the perfect fit for you, or you know the editors of the series or whatever. So there's lots of factors to take into consideration, and also sometimes the process is going to be quicker. I think, for example, that because having published edited volumes at Routledge and my book at Oxford, I think Routledge goes faster. They are able to issue book and to produce the book faster. So time might be also an element you want to consider when you look at the press. So I hope I've been clear. Mia, I let you ask stuff if you think.
Yeah, great. I would just, I think you described this very detailed, and I would just like to add one reflection, which is depending on where you are based. It can be, as Eléonore discussed before, but it can make a difference also to in what way the publisher is interested in your work. For example, in the Scandinavian context or Nordic context where I am based, we don't have so many university presses, actually none, compared with other European countries or US where they have a lot of university presses. So here I have noticed that, so to say, commercial publishers are very interested in the work from Nordic scholars, because they know we don't have so many other places to publish, and they are looking for researchers, actually, because there is also a willingness, of course, from the publisher to find academics. So here, to find a match is a good is one also advice that I could bring. So So I suggest we shift the slide. And now I just wanted to say to everyone a little bit, like we, Eléonore and I developed this, we planned this presentation based on the info that we should give, make explicit the different steps to publication or how to publish a book. So we try to be as like detailed and concrete as possible, to be like a little bit hands-on in the process, how it was, and we share our experience. So what will happen now is, after we describe like a little bit why publish a book and how to go about choosing the publisher or approaching a publisher, we now move more into our stories of publishing experiences and how we did, and share some reflection or experience of what can be good to think about when it comes to writing the proposal. And when it comes to the writing process and the timetable, and also the timing of the book. So these are questions we are going to discuss in the rest of the presentation, and we hope, we plan this for the time of like 40-50 minutes. So we will speak about 20 more minutes, and then we take questions and discussion. And I see that Demet put right in the chat that you can ask questions also in the chat. And we already have a question, but I suggest we take them after the presentation. So we use this time when we have. Okay. I will just go ahead then for this slide, which is 2 different stories of publishing. And I would like to say something about my own experience of publishing my book. And then I will give the word to Eléonore to share your experience. And so I will say just a few words about the context of my book, because this will probably be useful for you when I share my advice. So I based my book on my postdoc research, as I mentioned before. So it was a postdoctoral project for 2 years. I collected all the data. The postdoc was based on ethnographic field research. I collected all the data, and I had like been thinking of some kind of analysis already when I approached a publisher, or a publisher actually approached me, but I will come to that. But I had already started to think about the analysis and the structure, and I decided that I would like to write a book. I decided that I would like to write a book because my previous supervisor actually told me, you should write a book. So it was more or less like something she told me was a very useful thing for me to do. And I felt, okay, why not go for a book? Then I was like thinking of publishers. I didn't know how to approach publishers. I was a little bit insecure on the process. In the meantime, I was asked to be a reviewer of a book proposal from Routledge. And this actually sparked me into the process, because in the proposal document, they asked if I myself were having ideas for publication or a book. And I said, yes, actually, I have an idea. It is about this and this, I wrote. And I would be happy to learn more from you how I can go develop this into a book. And so the editor contacted me after that and sent me the template of the proposals and helped me to do, yeah, she was very supportive. And that happened. So in that way, I didn't have, I just passed through the phase of choosing or selecting the publisher, because in a way the publisher not necessarily selected me, but I just happened to fall upon one publisher. Yeah. And then since I already had used my postdoc to collect the data and to think about the analysis and to write this proposal, it was a quite quick process for me then to write the book itself. But I had research time for doing this, and we will come back to that soon, writing the book itself. But for me, I had research time, so I could devote 100% of my time for writing. In the end, it took 2 years. It was quite a quick process from the start when I submitted my proposal until the book was out. So this was a quick process, but it took still 2 years. So I will now give the word to Eléonore. You can say something what you would like of your experience, and then we continue with the details around the specifics.
Yeah, thank you, Mia. So I want to be quick. Okay, so my story is very different. So I was trained in France for my PhD, so I did my first book in French. And so maybe, you know, being in Europe, maybe a lot of you in the audience have the same problem that we are trained in a non-English institution, and we do the first research or the PhD in a non-English, non-Anglophone institution, in non-English speaking. And then, you know, what's the language you write in your dissertation is going to define if you can turn it into a book in English or not. So for me, it was French. So after, when I got a job in Canada, I started a new big project, and I had this idea that I wanted to do a monograph in English because I didn't have that possibility with my dissertation in the first place. And it felt like something I wanted to do to reach that audience, because not everybody speaks French in academia. And so that was the idea from the beginning, but to materialize it took a very long time for lots of reasons. So I had experiences of publishing edited volumes in English in the meantime, but it took some time because of my own thought process in terms of what the book is going to be about and what kind of argument I want to make. And that was really, that took a lot of thinking. And then it took some time also because I changed institution. I came back to Europe. And then I started, once I had like a first rough draft, well, kind of a first rough draft, or like 2/3 of my manuscript, I decided at that point to write a proposal and to try presses, because university press, because at that point, I didn't feel like I could continue writing without having the certainty that I would get a contract somewhere. Like at that point, I needed that idea that there would be, that the book would exist somewhere, because otherwise I was losing motivation, you know. I started writing, I didn't care about that, but at some point I was like, okay, to finish that book, I need to make sure that somebody's going to publish it. So I better like do a proposal now that I know more the architecture of the book, and I think I can pitch it in an effective way to publisher. And then so I did a book proposal. I had it read by friends, by colleagues, to really like polish it. And then I started, and as often, I mean, that's a strategy. I had time, like I had a tenured position. I had all the time in my life. So why not aim at, you know, like the top of the publisher, and then I will go down in my scale until, you know, somebody accepts the manuscript, which means that I did get a lot of rejections. I mean, that's the pitch of my story. I got a lot of rejects, especially by a US university press. And it took me some time to understand that really, as an academic based in Switzerland, who didn't have a PhD from the US and who was not working on the US, in a way, it was kind of useless to apply for US academic publishers, because like the answer was always the same, that they could not market my book to their audience. So they just thought that a book which is not on the US from an academic who's not based in the US was not worth it. So which doesn't mean that, you know, you cannot do it. You know, the topic or like something might, you know, make you, or if you're UK based, it's also already a little bit different. So, you know, there might be a context in which this is going to happen, but for me, it didn't happen. So I kept being rejected by, you know, NYU and then Stanford and Berkeley and Minnesota and Princeton, whatever. It kept coming in, you know, very quickly, emailed by editors, very nice emails. And then you know, a philosophy series at Columbia said yes, and then after receiving the manuscript they said no, which was really not nice, but they had a budget cut. So anyway, so that took forever, and but at that point I think, you know, it was a good choice to actually make those send the proposal and see what comes back. before I finished the manuscript. And in the end, I got interested by Oxford in sociology. I don't know why, I just got lucky with the editor there who had an interest in that. I mean, Palgrave was also interested, but I decided to go with Oxford. And then in the end, it worked out quite well, but then it took time because the book went to review. One of the reviewers never sent the review because she had a baby apparently in the process. And so the review took time, at least, 5 or 6 months. Then I had revisions to make. Then publication, like the process of doing the book, again takes 9 to 10 months. So in the end, like, it was a very, I don't want to count, like me, I can't say how much, like, honestly, I don't want to think about how many years. Like, I guess from the moment I started sending the proposal to the publication, it was almost 3 years, maybe, almost. Yeah, something like that. But I had started writing the book a little bit before, so it's a little bit longer. So yeah, so that's a different story, but I think it illustrates the idea of the right fit with the press, and that's really important to, like, have this analysis of your context, of what's your argument, what's the discipline, what's the kind of angle you have, and have the right press, because otherwise you're going to just, like, get rejection mails forever. So yeah. So so as Mia said, there's a little bit of craft in contacting publishers, and so your book proposal is really like the key to this process. So there's lots of, I mean, I know Demet mentioned when we prepared this that Palgrave has, for example, like an outline of how you should do it. So different presses can give you that. What's sure, it's what has to be in it. So the length is going to vary. I wouldn't go over 20 pages because I don't think the editor wants to read that long, but it could go, and I mean, to 20 pages certainly, but not much more. So you have to pitch your book, right? So you have to provide a summary of the argument, why it's topical, why it's important, an outline of the chapter. You have to describe and define the audience of your book for the publisher. You have to already say upfront how long the book is going to be. You have to explain what kind of material it's based on, so because that also defines the originality of the book. So how far you are in writing the book is also important to mention in the book proposal. Like, are you halfway through? Is the manuscript finished? Is it a revised version of your PhD? You have to explain all this. And you can also list potential reviewers. Although, I mean, some presses will ask you for that, and other will actually mention that they will not use the name you mentioned on purpose. Like Oxford was very clear to me. They were like, thanks, but no thanks. We'll do like a total blind peer review, and we don't want any possibilities of having somebody that actually knows you and is being partial. So that's what has to be in the book. I think it should be without jargon, because you have to show that you can, talk to an audience as wide as possible, and you have to insist on the originality of your argument and the need for your book in your field. So you really, what is it that you contribute and why it's important? And that's really the crux of selling your project to the publisher. And as I said before, it's important to think about the fit. Okay, so depending on where you're based, in what context you're working, the topic, what is it that makes the most sense for your work is going to be very specific to you, and there's no magic formula about that. Mia, do you want to add something about drafting the proposal?
I think you said most of it, apart from, I will just add that I think it is, I have my experiences also from comments from reviewers after I have submitted my proposal and reviewers read it and it comes back with the comments from the reviewers. I got surprised that they want me to be so detailed. So this is something I can also share with you about details that they are interested in hearing about how you are going to describe those details in your book, because a proposal is a special genre, because it's not the book, it's not the chapter, it's a description of how you think of your book. So to try to find the level of detail there is good, because this is what reviewers and evaluators, then also the publisher, is interested to see in order for them to be able to see what kind of a book is this going to be. So that is what I wanted to add. And I think we have some interesting things in the next slide that you can continue with, Eléonore, and then I can add.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, when I say you need to give an outline of chapters, I mean, that would be like at least 2 paragraphs for each chapter explaining what's going to be in it, how that chapter, you know, approaches or addresses that topic, etc. So I agree that it has to be some flesh, right, for the editor to be interested. So the process in itself, once you have your proposal, what happens? So you manage to find the emails of publishers, of series editors, and you begin sending it. So compare, like, the difference with publishing an article is that you can send to various publishers at the same time. Nobody is expecting you to go from one to the other and waiting for each response. So my strategy would be to identify the 3 top presses for your work and then send to the 3 first presses at the same time. And then you get answers, and then you try 3 or 4 more, and then you go on like that. So that's a possibility. So often the response is quick. So as I mentioned, I did apply to lots of publishers. And so, I mean, the most was like maybe 48 hours. So really, I mean, except Oxford, because it was August and the guy was on vacation. So I thought they said no. And then after 3 weeks, he came back like, oh, actually. So that was the good news. But often it's really quick, because they mostly take that decision given the topic and what they think is the marketability of your work to their audience, given their press. So, you know, sometimes an editor would tell me, we're too small, you should go to a bigger press because this is too niche for us, right? This kind of answer. But they respond really quickly. So that's the good part. You don't have to wait that much. So rejection is often, you know, based on that possibility of a good fit with the publisher strategies and their priorities. And, you know, I mentioned, for example, my story with Columbia. What happened is, in the end, the book was not marketable enough in philosophy. They had budget cuts, so they had suddenly like a very limited number of books they could publish, and so they drew out of the discussion. So if you are accepted, most of the time, in most presses, you're going to have a review process in an academic press. So the review process can be on the book proposal or on the whole manuscript. So, you know, or sometime, you know, it's going to be, they are going to ask the book proposal in 1 chapter if you have it. But like, it's rather like either the book proposal or the manuscript. So of course you don't get the same feedback depending on that, and you don't have as many revision as to do if it's on the book proposal or on the whole manuscript. But I've been through both, depending on edited volume or monograph. But yeah, so you could, for example, like have the editor said, I'm interested, I will send it for review, but at that point you have not finished the manuscript. So you tell him, okay, so I'm going to finish the manuscript. You'll have the manuscript in 3 months, and then he'll send it for review. So that's a typical timeline that you can have. Mia, if you want to add something.
No, I think we go ahead. I see there are questions in the chat relating to this, but we can discuss this after the presentation, I think. So I go ahead actually with this. How long will it take to have my book published? And as we already have been discussed, calculate that this is a slow process. So we try to go step by step here to give an indication of approximate how long time it can take. This is a description of how it can be. To know if a publisher is interested in the proposal itself, if there is this fit with the publisher or not, can take a week or two. Then the review of the manuscript, which is the manuscript of the whole book, can take up to between 3 to 6 months. And then the revision depends on your time, of course. So this can, and also the size of the comments or the how much you would need to revise actually. I know, for instance, colleagues who also have been asked to collect new material because reviewers found the material is too old. So this is also something, it can be good to take into account that this can be something that publishers can ask about or reviewers can ask about. So to calculate add some extra time for this if possible. And then the publication process itself. So when you submit the manuscript after revision, it will take 6 up to 10 months. This is the production process where they go through the language and the setting and the cover and all the index stuff, all these things. And you will be asked to respond to questions from the publisher during this time. So here is 2 years is a pretty good score. And calculate with more, probably it will take more time than 2 years. And also this is also the advice that try to not be in a rush for this, but take your time. Also both for the proposal to think it through and to share it like Eléonore also did. To share it with colleagues, to give their input and to have their suggestions on how you can strengthen it. And then also for the manuscript to write it. Before we go to the next slide, I would like to ask Eléonore if you would like to say something more about this.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add something about the revision. So revision is also a negotiation with the publisher, right? You don't have, you may say, I accept to do this revision, but not that one. And at that point, it's really your editor at the publishing, who's publishing, who's going to decide, right? So except in some presses, so university presses, your manuscript, your revised manuscript with the reviews has to be voted, has to be approved by the board. So your editor takes your revised manuscript with your explanation of what you've revised, takes the reviews and go to his or her board to ask for the board's acceptance of your manuscript. And usually it's a smooth process, but it means that you really have to be, you really have to be, to have an understanding with your editor that you have revised the manuscript enough and that it is what reviewers asked if you want in the end that the manuscript is accepted by the board. So that kind of, it depends on the press, but you can always, it's also a negotiation, it's a discussion about the reviews. It's like for an article, you don't for you, but it's important. So that may take time as well. So it's really important to take that into consideration.
Yeah, so now comes the writing of the book and the challenges and also the pleasures of this, because it's also something that is very nice, taking everything into account. But so the first thing is the challenges that we would like to bring up, what we experienced also. It's one challenge is to find this time that you need to write uninterrupted. And that is, of course, a difficult thing. We have, when you write the proposal, this is also part of writing the proposal, to think about the timetable for your book and how you go about writing the different chapters and how you think of when you should submit the manuscript. And so this is something you deliver when you write the proposal. You say, the deadline will be December 10. And then you sit and write the book. For example, for me, I will share an anecdote, because when I wrote my book, I had a deadline 1st of October, I remember. I was writing the whole spring and the whole summer. And in the summer, I found I have only written, or not barely, I have even, haven't written chapter 1 and 2 yet. I haven't started on chapters 3, 4, 5. And I felt like this will never go well. So I won't be able to keep the timeline that I set. Actually, what I did was, instead of getting a crisis, it was a little bit of a crisis, of course, but I contacted the editor and I said, because of this and this reason, I'm not able to keep the deadline. I would like to postpone it. Is it possible? And she said, yes, of course it is. So this was no problem. And it was just such a relief for me to hear. So I could postpone it with the 2 months. And the reason why, when I later thought of the process, the reason why I became so late in the writing process was because I started actually when I look at it retrospectively, the wrong part of the book. I started trying to write chapter 1, this is the aim of the book. This is what the book will be about. This is the theory I use, because I had it much in my head, but I couldn't write it because I didn't do the analysis yet in the coming chapters, which were the empirical chapters, the later chapters. So in the summer, I decided actually to shift. So I started with empirical chapters, and the final chapter, very final chapter I wrote the week before submission was chapter 1 in the end. So this is something to think about. How will you develop your writing process so that it is useful for you and fruitful for your process? And I also find it very, very useful with peer readers. So to ask colleagues in different stages of your work, to ask them to read and to discuss a little bit with you. You can have a seminar about it. You can have one-on-one discussion with a colleague. But it is this is something I would like to encourage you to do. And then we have, after the manuscript is like done and you have submitted it, for me, what happened when I did this, I suddenly couldn't let go of the manuscript. So I started to realize I had a little bit of fear of publish, actually. I don't want it to be out there. So I wanted to keep it in my computer. So what happened was that with the copy editor, I never let her go. I said, no, I have a little change. I have one more small change. And this minor thing, I just need to change. So in the end, it took several months for the copy editor to work with me, because I was really scared of having it out. So some realization that this is also a process going through. So I spoke with colleagues again. It was very helpful. They supported me a lot in this. To in the end actually let it go. And so, Eléonore, I give you the pleasures to mention, because we're a little bit running out of time.
Yeah. So the pleasure, I mean, it's incredible. Like I thought it was an addictive experience. I don't want to write an article anymore. Like I have no motivation for articles anymore after writing a book. So I think the length, so it's both daunting because of the amount of writing you have to do. And so, which means like the amount of thinking that you have to go through and trying to find the right architecture for your book. But then it's fantastic to, like, as I say, hear and discover your own voice. Because I feel once you've done the literature review, you have all those chapters to develop, where you don't have to mention that anymore. You don't have to do lip service to this and that. And you're much freer, actually. So I think that it's a space of freedom. And also, I think that publishers, in many ways, at least that was my experience at Oxford, like, honestly, the book is really, it's very interdisciplinary. It's like heavy theoretical, but I'm a sociologist, so there's a lot of empirics. And I really thought that it would not find a home because of that. And I think that in an article, it would be difficult because it would be hard to find a journal that accepts such a kind of mix. And so I think publishers in many ways are more open to things that are a little bit, outside of the boxes that journals and disciplines define. So I think that's something that's nice, and that's very it nourishes you as you write the book. And then then the impact and the contribution, and the fact that it's a solid piece of paper that you can keep to stabilize your desk, or or that you can reread afterwards, is very nice. So I think, yeah, in terms of impact and for your own development, in terms of thinking, I think it makes a big difference than thinking piece by article. So yeah, so I enjoyed the experience, and like me, I think once you get through the fears and the anxiety and everything, it's really nice when you can hold it in your hands. Yeah. So to finish really quick, pricing and open access. So we're in an open access world right now. So pricing is important because it also decides who's going to buy the book, although you don't really care, given the fact that your royalties are so small. It really doesn't make a big difference. But you may want to, like, if you have through your university, through some kind of research funds that you can get from foundations or other institutions, you may want to check if you can have some money, because it can either help you negotiate with the publisher to maybe lower the price of your book if it's really expensive in hardcover. You can also discuss with the publisher if the paperback copy, the paperback edition of the book is going to be out at the same time at the hardcover or not, because like the difference, the price goes from 1 to 4 in terms of like paperback to hard copy. And you can also inquire about open access through institutions funding, and try to negotiate with your editor to have some kind of online open access version if you have access to money, to funds that are targeting open access. So this is something that you may want to keep in mind in order for your book to be actually accessible and read by people. So I think we'll end here, and we took a little bit of time, and we're really sorry about it. But hopefully we didn't repeat ourselves, and you had already quite some information about the process. And I think we can open the Q&A, and I'm gonna unshare my screen.
Well, thank you very much, Eléonore and Mia. It was really useful. I am, as you know, I am in process of writing my book proposal, and I had quite a lot of useful tips. So thank you very much. If you want, I can moderate the Q&As if it's okay with you. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
So the first question we had was about the semi-academic books, like autoethnographies or books directed at the general public. What kind of publishers may be interested? That was the first question.
Damn it, sorry, I will just interrupt because remind you of the recording.
Oh yeah, thank you.